Suze Orman says you need at least $5 million to retire. In fact, $10 million would be even better. Conversely, Dave Ramsey says $1 million is just fine. Who's right? Well, first let's see what Dave Ramsey had to say when a guy wrote into his show wondering if $1.4 million was enough to retire on.
So if you looked at $1.4 million and it's invested, let's say that you're averaging a 10% rate of return, are you able to live on the 10% comfortably with inflation, with all of your expenses? So in his case, $140,000 a year. Does that feel right? If you feel like yes, then great.
It'll last forever.
It'll last forever because you're never touching the principal.
Yeah, it'll keep laying the golden eggs.
That's right.
Okay, let's summarize. The listener wants to know if he can retire on $1.4 million. Dave and his co-host promptly inform him that given a linear 10% year-over-year rate of return, which is eminently achievable, by the way, he can live on $140,000 per year in perpetuity. That $1.4 million will just keep laying golden eggs forever. How is this possible? Because so long as you invest that $1.4 million in good stock mutual funds, he can merely skim that 10% growth off the top of his portfolio, never, ever eroding the principal. Okay, deep breath. I can get through this. Dave Ramsey is completely ignorant of what is frequently referred to as sequence of returns risk. Ramsey's 10% withdrawal rate in this instance presupposes that the investor never experiences a down year. Imagine for a second that you retired in the year 2000 with $1 million and you took Ramsey's advice of withdrawing 10% or $100,000 per year. You'd be out of money in a breathtaking 8 years. Now, you may be thinking that nobody is quite crazy enough to take Ramsey's advice on this because even the beginner investor understands that you don't actually experience 10 or 12% returns every single year. The cost of admission for stock market investing is, after all, market volatility. But Ramsey and company seem to be completely oblivious to this possible outcome. Now, let's say you want to temper your strategy and only take 8% distributions per year, which, by the way, Ramsey has also recommended on a different episode. Hard to figure out exactly what this guy believes. Well, take a look at this chart. According to Dr. Wade Pfau, one of the foremost experts in the sustainable retirement income planning space, if you invest in 100% stocks, as Ramsey recommends, and you take 8% withdrawal rates on your portfolio, you will run out of money in advance of your actuarial life expectancy an astounding 63% of the time. It's not even a coin flip. It's 2 out of 3 times. You'll end up living out the balance of your retirement subsisting on Social Security alone. Okay, so in no world where math and actuarial science hold up, does Ramsey's recommendation actually make sense? It could very easily qualify as financial malpractice. In fact, I wrote an entire USA Today best-selling book that talks all about it if you'd like to learn more. All right, now that we've ruled Ramsey's approach out due to extreme lack of mathematical rigor, let's take a look at Suze Orman's approach. She says you need at least $5 million to retire, but you'd be much better off with $10 million. Before we dig into the rationale behind Suze's recommendation, let's take a look at what PhDs over the last 4 decades have recommended as a sustainable rate of distribution. With near unanimity, PhDs have sided with the so-called Trinity study, which said that if you constrain yourself to 4% distributions on your day one retirement balance and adjust for inflation every year thereafter, you'll have a reasonably high chance that you won't run out of money before you run out of life. Something like 85%. So the question is, how does Suze Orman feel about the 4% rule? Turns out she hates it. Take a listen.
Maybe you were taking out 4% and 4%, even though you didn't need it. And now you get ill. And now you didn't have long-term care insurance. So the more you can not take out of a retirement account, the better you are. So I would not be using the 4% figure on any level.
So the question becomes, what is a sustainable withdrawal rate according to Suze Orman? It's more like 3%. Life is going to throw at you long-term care events, financial crises, family emergencies, and you have no business taking 4% out of your portfolio. Your retirement balances just won't survive it. So all of this explains why Ramsey landed on $1 million and Suze landed on at least $5 million. A 10% withdrawal rate on $1 million gives you $100,000 per year, and a 3% withdrawal rate on $5 million gives you $150,000 per year. But according to Suze, after netting out all the extra costs for trials and emergencies that life is likely to throw your way, you'll probably end up with about $100,000 to pay for your actual lifestyle. Given this wide disparity between the 2 biggest gurus in the country, who do we believe? Which strategy makes more sense, Ramsey or Orman? Well, as I said before, Ramsey's math is so unhinged and detached from reality that it couldn't possibly even be considered. Which leaves us with Suze Orman's 3% recommendation. Should you constrain yourself to a paltry 3% withdrawal rate? After all, it seems like a pretty expensive way to go about making sure your money lasts through your actuarial life expectancy. The fact is, the 3% rule is the least cost-effective way to purge longevity risk from your retirement picture. The truth is, there's a much less expensive way to ensure that your money lasts as long as you do. For example, did you realize that if you used a guaranteed lifetime income annuity, you could cover your living expenses far less expensively than Suze's 3% rule approach? Consider this. Let's say you needed $40,000 to live in retirement every year, adjusted annually for inflation. Under Suze's approach, you'd have to save $1.333 million by day one of retirement. 3% of that amount gives you $40,000. If you instead wanted to purchase $40,000 of inflation-adjusted income from an annuity company under today's prevailing interest rates, it would cost you much closer to $675,000. That's half of what might be required under the Suze Orman 3% rule approach. That, of course, frees up a lot of money to be able to do some very interesting things. Build your discretionary fund, take that trip around the world, take your grandkids on that Disney cruise, plug that hole in your roof, you name it. In short, neither of what Dave Ramsey or Suze Orman tells you regarding the amount of money you need to retire seems to make a lot of economic sense. Ramsey's withdrawal rates are far too extravagant and have a high likelihood of bankrupting you midway through your retirement. Suze Orman's 3% rule is far too expensive and means you'll have to build a massive nest egg by day one of retirement to have a realistic chance of being able to retire on your terms. If your goal is to ensure that your living expenses are guaranteed until the day that you die, a lifetime income annuity is far less expensive and far more certain than the traditional guru-based approach.